Hello, and it's lovely to meet you all. And my name is Barbara. I am Italian, born and raised, living in Switzerland, and I have an academic background around the topics of human rights and international law. But I very quickly found out early in my career that I was a little bit too creative to focus on the law alone. So I've always held positions in communications. I've been working in humanitarian NGOs for more than 12 years now. I'm also very passionate about sailing, and one thing led to the other, and I have started volunteering with search and rescue NGOs in 2023 in the Central Mediterranean, which led me to take the job that I currently have, which is a position as communications coordinator with a German NGO that is called SOS Humanity. And I don't know if you heard about it, but SOS Humanity was founded in 2022. It was originally the German branch of SOS Méditerranée, which you might also have heard about as an NGO that is working in search and rescue operations in the Central Mediterranean. And really the main mission of this NGO is to protect the human rights of people who are fleeing persecution and violence and vulnerability through the Mediterranean Sea. Most of my job, not only because I also work on land, but I think the part that you're mostly interested in is the part where I work on this beautiful vessel that you see here, which is called Humanity 1. It's a rescue ship that is operating in the Central Mediterranean. We have 29 crew members. Some of them are permanent employees. Some others are volunteers on a rotating basis. And what we do is really focusing on search and rescue operations and providing support to people in distress in the Mediterranean. I am not going to go through too much into the history of search and rescue because I think we have a bit more interesting topics to talk about, but I just wanted to say to start that crossing the Mediterranean to move, to migrate is something that has happened since the very beginning of time. And people have been doing it since humanity started. However, I think it's mostly in the past 20 to 30 years that we really started seeing people crossing the Mediterranean, escaping to conflict situation because of the geopolitical situation, especially in North Africa or in the Middle East. And people have been increasingly trying to flee again, conflict, persecution, situations of extreme poverty, and getting to Europe by crossing the sea. And I think what we started seeing more increasingly in the media starting 2023 is situations of extreme distress. For example, in 2023, there was a very famous shipwreck that killed 600 people that generated a lot of media attention and prompted the European Union to start the Operation Mare Nostrum, which was an operation actually mostly managed by Italy that was aiming to find distress cases in the Mediterranean and provide assistance. And when that operation came to an end very quickly, only after 1 year because of the lack of finance, that's where the NGO started jumping in to fill this gap and provide assistance to people. We say that the year this started was 2015. That's a symbolic date. And very sadly, last year we remembered, I'm not going to say we celebrated because it's really not a celebration, but we remembered, we commemorated the 10-year anniversary since the beginning of civilian search and rescue operations in the Mediterranean, which is a very sad anniversary to remember. Before we delve more deeply into the comms aspect, I just wanted to stress that search and rescue at sea is a legal duty. It's not just a matter of ethics. It's not something we do because it's good and it's nice to do. It is a legal obligation enshrined in international law. And it's a duty that applies to all ships, no matter where they are, in all parts of the world, Mediterranean, beyond the Mediterranean, everywhere. And it concerns every person that is in a situation of distress, no matter where they come from, what their religion is, what their nationality is. Everybody has a right to be assisted when they are in distress at sea. And the law, the international law, also says that whenever you're in distress and you're rescued, you must be brought to a place of safety. And I don't know if you heard about this term before, but a place of safety is a place where your life is no longer threatened, but also a place where your basic human needs are met. And by basic human needs, I mean I mean, like your necessity for food and shelter and medical treatment, but also a place where you're no longer going to be persecuted. And I'm stressing this because there's a lot of academic consensus and even from international entities stressing that at this moment in time, Libya and Tunisia cannot be considered places of safety where people are truly protected. And this is why you will never see an NGO working in search and rescue operations, rescuing a person and taking the person back to Libya or Tunisia, because this is not a place where they're going to be truly protected and where their needs are going to be met. We can now, I think, delve a little bit more deeply into the interesting part. And I thought it might be interesting for you as people with a design background to talk about the challenges of having a communication role in the framework of search and rescue operations, especially as people who for sure manage photo and video as part of your role. There's a lot of ethical dilemmas and legal requirements that come with it. So I thought it might be fun to delve a little bit more deeply into this. I just want to stress that this communication side is something that is really deeply embedded in the mission of SOS Humanity, because what we strive to do as an organization is not just to save lives, to provide assistance, to protect people, to assist them, but really also to testify, to document what is happening in the Central Mediterranean, the journey that people are taking, the challenges that they experience throughout their journey. And hopefully we do that so that we can influence the public opinion and the European institutions and create positive change and change the policies that are affecting them currently. So was that a question or just a mic?
Yeah, just a mic, don't worry.
Yeah. Okay, I'll keep going. So communication is really deeply embedded in what we do. And my role, I also have a role on land, but I thought it would be more interesting to talk about what my role is like when I'm on board. My role is that of a communication coordinator. I'm not the only person having this role. Actually, there's 3 of us on a rotating basis. And that person you see in the picture there is my colleague Lucas, for example, who has my same role. And this is to make sure that every point in time, there's one person on board, one person on shore supporting the team on board, and one person who's taking time off because it's coming out from the time on board. So we keep rotating and making sure that the needs are met. Also, what is really interesting about my role is that when I'm on board on Humanity One, I am a member of the head of mission team. And this is a bit special of my organization. Usually you would have one person being the head of mission, and we instead have a team of 4 people. And this is really to make sure that whenever any decision is made on the ship regarding operations, regarding the crew, then all of the needs are taken into account, including communication needs. And I think that's really beautiful because it really stresses how much communication is taken into account in operations. Responsible for it ultimately. And so this is what I want to really talk about later in the next few slides. I have other roles. For example, I am responsible to make sure that everybody on board has access to the information that they need. And I'm also the link between the ship and the team on land that is supporting us from the office. And a bit less interesting, a bit more stressful, I'm also responsible for evidence collection, which means recording all of the emails, all of the phone calls, all of the communication that happens between the ship and the authorities. And I have responsibility to make sure that everything is stored for legal purposes and also for advocacy purposes. And I'm also a spokesperson and in the main media focal point when it comes to journalists. I thought what would be possibly interesting for you guys is to delve a little bit more deeply into these complex dilemmas and ethical aspects of managing comms, because I think there's a lot to be said and a lot to be also discussed at Food for Thought. So I'm going to now talk a little bit more about what we have as our core principles in our communication work when we are on board. And the main thing, everything starts from the fact that we aim not to do any harm or further harm to the people that we rescue and come on board. This is because the people that we encounter at sea already come from a situation that is usually really difficult. They have suffered human rights abuses, exploitation. They come from a really difficult journey, and we do want to document what they go through, but we do not want, through our media, to create more harm or to trigger more trauma or to awaken really difficult memories. So anytime we have to keep in mind that by the work we do, the documentation work that we do, we may harm these people again, and that should always be in the back of our minds. Another thing that we put a lot of emphasis onto in my organization is informed consent. Basically, this means that whenever a person is recognizable in a picture, whenever we want to use the image of a person in a way that makes this person identifiable, we always want to do that with the consent of the person. And not just any content, like a very truly informed consent and understanding of what we're going to be using this picture for and how and when and where. And this is not just a matter of ethics. We don't do that just because we're nice people. It's also a legal requirement that we have to comply with. So for example, if I want to take a picture where a person is truly visible in their faces or is recognizable through, for example, some body traits, then make the person identifiable, we are never going to use that picture unless we have talked to the person and asked if the person is okay with it. When I say okay with it, I don't just mean, hey, are you cool with me taking a picture? No, we really want the person to be truly informed about why we're doing what we're doing, when and where are we going to be publishing this picture, what kind of reach can it have, and how long are we going to keep this picture? And we really want to make sure that this is fully understood. So we have a proper conversation with the person each time we want to use one of such pictures. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but this is extremely delicate because a person who's coming on board is in an extremely difficult situation. Sometimes they might be just really grateful because they've been assisted, and they might feel pressure to say, yes, sure, take a picture, because they're feeling really thankful for our assistance and not really understanding truly what that might mean in the longer term. So this is something that we are extremely careful about. And we are even more careful when it's people with a particular vulnerable state, for example, children or other people that are facing a very difficult situation. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a second. Another thing that is really important to stress is that some of the pictures that we take might create risks for the person when they disembark and then apply for asylum or international protection. That might be used as evidence against them for whatever reason. So we also want to be extremely careful about not putting them in a complex situation. The other thing that you might probably have heard if you follow the media a little bit is that for Italian authorities, there is a policy for which the person who is caught driving the boat is assumed to be responsible for the smuggling of the people to Italy. So there's an assumption that the person who's driving is also the person that organized the trafficking of people and is benefiting financially from the situation. By experience, we know that this is absolutely not necessarily true, that very often the person who's driving a boat is a person who's just found themselves in this situation. Sometimes they get a discount on their money because they're driving the boats, or sometimes they just happen to be capable of driving a boat and nobody else is. So they're the person who can keep the rest of the group safe. So we know that this is not necessarily true. However, because of this policy, we also extremely careful at not making this assumption that the person who's driving, portraying the person driving as the person who was also responsible for the smuggling and trafficking. That's extremely delicate, and this is something that any person taking pictures or videos on board have to keep in mind very, very seriously. Another thing that might come up is that, for example, a lot of people might not want to be pictured because they might be seen as supporters of Western civilization, or they don't want necessarily the people back home to know that they fled, that they escaped, because that might create a risk for their families. And this is also something that is extremely delicate, extremely sensitive. That's happening, and we also know that we might have to be careful about the impact that it has, not just on the person but even on their relatives back home. And for these reasons, something that we always do, we always maintain a right to privacy and anonymity. So we will never ever match a picture of a person where the picture makes the person identifiable with the full name of the person. We will never ever do that to protect the person's privacy and rights. And this leads to very creative solutions when it comes to taking pictures, not just in the taking, but also in the way we're selecting the pictures that we use. And these are all very common tricks, I want to say, or strategies that we use so that we can still document what is going on in the Mediterranean while respecting the rights of the person. And you might see in these pictures, it's very common strategies. For example, no faces. You still represent the person from the back or in action so that you don't see the face in an identifiable way. You might want to blur out the picture so the people are not recognizable in their faces. You might want to focus on details, for example, the hands, some parts of the body. That express an emotion, but still not showing the face, or again, taking advantage of light conditions so that you see the silhouette of the boat, but not necessarily the people themselves. And photographers on board use these strategies a lot, and it's a way for them to still make beautiful pictures that really convey a message and convey a situation and emotion, and yet still manage to protect the right of the person. The other thing that is extremely crucial, and we have these conversations very often when we have photographers or journalists on board, is that we are extremely aware of the power imbalances that are formed once we rescue people. And what do I mean about this? I mean, we as the crew, we are completely in control of the situation. We are trained to do our job. We have communication channels. We are in control. We have equipment that keeps us safe. Whereas the people that we rescued, they completely depend on us for their safety, for food, to contact their relatives back home, to get to shore. They're completely dependent on us. And because of these power imbalances, of course, that's a different dynamic that is created between the crew and the survivors. We're hyper aware of this. I gave you an example just a few seconds ago. Like, some people might be pressured to say, yes, sure, take a picture of me. I'm really grateful. So do whatever you want with my image, without really fully realizing what that means in the longer term. And we really try to keep that in mind whenever a person gives informed consent. Like, is this person really meaning it, or is it more like a result of the situation? And the other thing that we always keep in the back of our minds, we don't want to perpetuate these white saviorism narrative of these white people who are really heroic, and they go out at sea and they rescue people because they're such nice people. And you probably have seen in your lifetime pictures of white people holding Black children. That would be a very typical and stereotypical example of white saviorism picture, where we celebrate the action of some powerful individuals, in contrast with the vulnerable situation of others that are receiving the assistance. We really do. We want to break this narrative. This is really not what our work is about. We want to fight stereotypes and narratives. And we just want to document in a very realistic way what is going on, so that people understand the challenges without perpetuating these harmful narratives. Something that is extremely critical, but if you've been around the humanitarian sector, you for sure already heard about and for sure have opinions on it. And I also actually want to hear from you. So I might maybe stop sharing my screen for a second and opening to some quick reactions. The other thing that is extremely difficult for us is understanding where to draw the line between having to document what is going on, because it's really important for people to understand, and situations, for example, of extreme distress, extreme suffering. Somebody is really feeling unwell. Maybe somebody is risking their lives and they are being treated on board, or they are in the water, not sure if they can be rescued or not. We do want to document, but for us, the priorities is always on saving people and on the lives of people. And I think this is a tension that I've heard so many times in the humanitarian sector. Where do you draw the line between, being there with a camera in your hands, because it's really important people see what's going on and understand the tragedy that is going on, versus, putting the operation first and really focusing on respecting the dignity of the person in that point of time, because the person is not in a situation that they might want to broadcast internationally. So I'm also really curious to see, for example, if you've been in this situation, and I'm going to stop sharing for a quick second before I continue. And just do maybe a very quick raise of hands. So in a situation when, for example, you're on board and you're the photographer on board, a person is really in an extreme situation of suffering, not sure if they're going to be surviving the situation. Are you going to be taking pictures because it's really important that the world sees what's going on? Or are you going to maybe, feeling something in your stomach saying, oh, this person is in a really bad state. I don't know if I want to take a picture of that. There's no right answer, obviously, but I don't know if you found yourselves in this situation before. Have you heard of something similar? Or if you have any reactions, would you take that picture just by a raise of hands?
I don't see the button to raise my hand, but maybe a thought on this topic. When I heard you talking about it, I was thinking maybe it's more about what mission you are on rather than what would you do. Like if I am employed by the boat to rescue people, then I would say that would be my first mission. And if I am employed by uh, a journal, then my mission would be to document. And so I would consider the situation more on with that perspective.
I don't hear you super well, but it's 29 people on board, right? So you're the photographer. Everybody else is hands on deck, rescuing the people. So it's not like this person is not being rescued or treated medically. Everybody's doing their best, but this person is in a really, really bad state. You would never want your mother or father or sister to be shown that way publicly, because it's not a situation that respects the person's dignity. And this is extremely delicate as an ethical situation. And I'm not saying there's a right or wrong. Us, in my organization, as a policy, we always have the utmost care to not portray people when they're not in a dignifying way. At the same time, I understand the tension and the challenge that a lot of people would want to show what is really going on. And you might probably remember a few years back, there's a picture that became incredibly famous, the picture of Alan Kurdi, who was like a little Syrian child. I think he was 3 or something like that. And he died in a shipwreck. He washed ashore, and a photographer took a picture of this little Syrian child dead on the shore. It was a heartbreaking picture. It broke my heart. I'm sure no parent anywhere in the world would ever see their child picture like that on international media. It's heartbreaking. And yet, if you remember the power that the picture had, it really shook a lot of souls. I remember that very shortly after, Germany adapted their policies and increased reception of Syrian refugees. It was a really major moment of reflection and inward looking for European institutions. And that was generated by a really powerful picture. Beatrice.
Yes, sorry. This was like one of my questions when you started talking about how like ethical capturing photographic and video content, and not being an expert in the area, but having done some sort of taking photos and videos, I've always sort of divided the moment where you take the photos and the post-production. So this is a question to like you. Do you tend to take the photos and then make a decision later, or do you try to avoid it straight away? Also, because that puts in the question of, okay, if you do sort of make a decision after in post-production, then that photo or video has already been taken, which sort of security, like, tech security issue on the plate. So I don't know if you've understood my question.
It's a big topic, and it's a beautiful question. Maybe I will just answer really quickly, and then we keep the broader discussion for the Q&A. In the moment, it's really hard to decide what pictures are compliant with guidelines or not. So the moment that we take the pictures, there's lots of pictures that are not compliant. Of course, there's no way to avoid it. What is really important is the way you use the pictures and the way you store and manage the pictures afterwards. So I would say it's less about the way they are taken. It's more about the use you make of them and the selection you make. But hold on to that thought, because it's a really interesting topic. I'm just going to finish the few slides that I have left, and we maybe can come back to the conversation right afterwards. Thanks for your reaction, by the way. To me, this is really one of the big questions that I have about humanitarian communication, and there's no right or wrong. It's just a huge ethical tension that I also feel in my work every single day. The other thing that we do on board is collecting testimonies, and this is also extremely delicate from an ethical point of view. Because people that have just been rescued, sometimes they stay on board for 2, 3, 4, 5 days, depending on the port that is assigned to the ship for disembarkation. So in some situations might have the opportunity, to settle, get some rest, get some food, and feel maybe in a different emotional or mindset to share the experience that they went through. And some people really find it also liberating as a way to they really want the public to know what they've been through. But it's still an extremely delicate issue, because of course the moment when you ask people to reshare a very sensitive, traumatizing experience, you have an enormous risk of re-traumatizing the person, or having some really difficult memories arise again, or putting them in a complex situations from a legal standpoint. Again, remember what I said about the implications of the testimonies they might have given when they have an asylum application pending, and so on and so forth. So for sure, this is also an extremely delicate part of our work. The same principles that I already shared keep standing. So we would never, ever take a testimony from a person who's not provided their fully informed consent, really understanding how we're going to use the testimony, where, for how long. We will absolutely respect the right of the person to anonymity, not share the full name of the person, not share the face and the visual image of the person. You see, like on the screen, a screenshot of a testimony that was recorded a few years back. You cannot see the person. You see the hospital that we have on board, because that is the place where it was recorded. And this is also because we try our best to create a space where the person feels comfortable. Who is present during the recording of testimony? We really try to make it as small as possible. We don't want to have a panel of people, interrogating somebody who's sharing really difficult memories. So it would be really like the strictest minimum of the people who need to be present. The person who's doing the recording, a cultural mediator, if the person is not speaking the same language of the person who's recording. And this is always, always, always done in very close collaboration with our care team. We have a care department. That's a group of people on board who take care of the medical side, for example, of things. We have a psychologist, we have a protection specialist, that is a person who's really an expert in the asylum process, that is also capable of raising, particular vulnerabilities that this person have, if they come from a war zone, for example, if they're women who've suffered sexual abuse, if they're children, minor, traveling alone, and so on and so forth. And before we would ask for a testimony from such people, we would always work very closely with these experts and trying to also figure out if that is a good idea, if the person is really aware of what is going on, if they feel emotionally ready for it. Yet some people do want to, and we always do that on a voluntary basis. We would never go around, and oblige people to share their stories, absolutely ever. But some people do come to us and they say, look, I really want the public to know what I've been through, because I think they should be aware of the situation in Libyan prisons, in my country. And this is something that we do. Also extremely, extremely delicate. We have a system on board. I haven't mentioned this before, but maybe it's interesting for you. We have a system for both audio, video, and testimonies. Every time people provide their informed consent, we give them a card with a reference number and a contact email, so that if they at some point for any reason change their mind after disembarkation, after we lost touch, they can still reach out to us and say, look, I'm very sorry, I thought about it. I really do not want my picture to be used anymore, my video, my testimonies, please delete it. And we, of course, we would do it right away. We monitor the inbox and then we will respond to their questions. Something that I find really sweet personally, very often they reach out to the same email address, not because they want us to delete the picture, but because they want to keep it. They want to keep a copy for themselves, which I always find very emotional, because it's also part of their lived life, and sometimes they also want to have a memory of it. The other thing that we put a lot of emphasis onto, and we really try to do in our work, is to describe human individual stories and people. The moment when you start talking about the mass, the migrants, the refugees, the displaced people, you lose the individuality of their stories and you start empathizing less, because it's just an anonymous mass of people. They're actual individuals with lived experiences, personal stories, hobbies and passions, and we really also want to make it understood they're just like us. They're human beings and with their own lived stories, and we want to describe them as such, not just as individuals, like random numbers in a mass. And for the same reason, which is a bit like the other side of the medal, we also don't want to only describe them as migrants. The moment you only talk to them as people who cross the Mediterranean in a boat, that's all of their identity. And again, it completely erases the fact they are a person with a 360-degree personality and stories. I think I was really fast because I wanted to allow for space for questions and interactions, and I'm really hoping that you might have a few for me. So if you do, please feel free to ask. Has anybody seen, for example, the movie Io Capitano, Me Captain?
No.
It's a very romanticized story, if you've seen it, but you probably remember also the challenges of this person and how he didn't have enough money to pay to be on the boat, so he was offered the role of captain, not because he was necessarily involved in the trafficking scheme, but just out of need. And I think that is a pretty realistic scenario. And well, any questions you might have from what is life on board like to to more audiovisual content, I'm very happy to answer.
I do have a question. Hi, Barbara, and
Hello.
thank you so much for being with us today. I'm definitely curious about how is the life on the boat. I joined a bit later, so I don't know if you shared something about it at the beginning of the call, but it's something that I've been wondering for a long time. I was actually it stuck with me one of the last slides when you were talking about, not don't treat them as number, but as single stories. And I was wondering, how do you handle that from your personal side? Because I guess you constantly very stressful situations with a lot of people going in and out, a lot of stories that you come across. How do you manage to stay focused on the human being in front of you when you're probably hundreds or dozens of people to take care of?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because it's also really not easy, and a lot of the people tend to come from a very similar journey, so they have shared a lot of very similar experiences. But I think really the point is to focus on them as human people that have gone through that individually. So you don't want to just share the same story on and on. You want to focus on the fact that is that one person as an individual who went through it personally, with different emotions and different reactions and different impacts and effects than all the others, which is absolutely not an easy thing to do, and I do agree with that. And then you asked about the boat. So one thing that maybe I haven't stressed enough that I really want to focus on, when I talk about civil action in search and rescue, a lot of people sometimes, very often, we only hear about the big organizations in the media and all the big boats and the main actors, the NGOs that have more resources. But there's actually a constellation, a universe of smaller assets, smaller boats, and a lot of associations also that provide support from land. And I don't think they really are very widely recognized in the media, but even, legal support provided to migrants. There are organizations that manage civilian monitoring aircrafts, which play an incredibly important role, because the planes, they monitor the Mediterranean, and usually they are very, very very often they are the ones that are flagging boats in distress at sea when you cannot see them with your binoculars from the ship. And there's these really big boats, but also there's many smaller assets, smaller boats that are mostly only volunteering, with all volunteer based, so with people volunteering on board, and a lot of them are sailing ships because they take fewer resources to run, and they don't end up in the media very often. So I work currently on a bigger boat that has a lot of resources and quite a bit of visibility, but that is not the end of the story. And I come actually from 3 years of volunteering on a very small sailing ship that still manages to rescue hundreds of people every time it goes out at sea. So this I really wanted to stress. And I don't know if you had any particular questions about life on board, but maybe what you missed is that we have 29 people usually on board. 28 of them are crew members. Some of them are permanent employees, some of them are volunteers. And usually we always reserve one spot for an external media representative, which is basically a journalist or somebody who's not part of the crew, but comes to either research or document what they see as an independent person. So they are not obliged to they're not necessarily part of the organization, but they report about what they see. But yeah, any questions? I'm very happy to share more about life on board.
Maybe to stay on that life on board, I mean, also there's a distinction between the crew who is managing the ship, right? The captain and people who are hired, and then the volunteers who are managing the organization side. At least that's how it worked on my experience. And so to relate us on that experience, what is the relationship you may have with this crew as someone representing communication? Because sometimes they are activists, people who may not really enjoy so much communication. So do you have some kind of, I mean, what is the life on board indeed as communication officer with the colleagues?
So yes, so we do have what we call the marine crew, or the nautical crew. So it's the people who make sure that the boats keeps being afloat. But there's also not such a strong distinction between, we're all part of the same crew. And you probably remember at the very beginning that I mentioned that we even have not one head of mission, but a head of mission team, because every time we take decisions, we want to make sure that the nautical crew is taken into account, but also the communications team, but also the care team. Care team is the people who take care of the medical part of things, the psychological impact, the protection side, and the search and rescue operation team. So I think we never think about it in terms of, oh, it's us and you. We are one big crew, and we all work together in a very close way. In the communication challenges, I think it's a very interesting question. I think we put a lot of effort into explaining what we do. Before we start sailing and become operational, we always spend a few days together as a crew for trainings. So every crew is training before we go out at sea. And part of that training is not just, how to rescue. Part of that training is also, why do we have a communications team on board, and why does it do what it do? And how can you contribute? And I must say that in my experience, people are extremely understanding. They see absolutely the value of what we do. And them contributing could be something really basic. For example, making sure they always wear their protection equipment in the pictures and with the logo of the organization, because this is what we want to represent in our communication, our professionalism, the fact that we respect our safety, all the way to, for example, participating in recording statements, so contributing to the content that we release on social media, putting us in touch with journalists that they might know, who have an interest in reporting about the work that we do. And people are extremely supportive because they understand the value of it. So I'm quite lucky in this sense. I see Beatrice with a raised hand.
Yes, I'm going to try and squeeze in 2 questions, if that's okay. You talked about the smaller organizations and, this whole network. I'm curious to know if you are in constant communication with each other, or how does it work? Because, I'll start with that. And then the second one is, you mentioned about the fact that there's always a place for a journalist on board. Is the place always filled or not?
Sorry, I missed the last part of your question. Can you repeat it?
You mentioned that you always have an available place for the journalist. I'm just wondering if a journalist always comes on board with you, or whether sometimes there isn't one.
Okay. Good ones. So to answer to the first part, I just pasted a link in the chat, which gives you a bit of an overview of the state of what we call the civil fleet. So all these civilian non-state actors that are contributing actively to search and rescue operations. It changes every year. But yes, people are in touch. There are some coordination mechanisms. If you've worked in the humanitarian sector, if you're familiar with the way the humanitarian sector coordinates through, for example, clusters or platforms, of course, it has not yet got to that level of complication. Also, it's a sector that has only existed for 10 years. It's a very long time, but it's also a really short time if you compare it with the beginning of the humanitarian sector as we know it today. I would say maybe I would trace back its origins to the 70s in the form that we currently know. We still have a really, really long way to create coordination systems. And also it's a civilian action that was started in the hope that it wouldn't be needed for a very long time. And very sadly, that has not been the case. So now it's starting to formalize and become increasingly more structured. But like, things, it's a process. The second part of the question, Oh, I forgot already. Oh, the journalists on board. So we always keep one spot. We call that spot for the position of the external media representative, which is a bit of a broader term because it doesn't necessarily have to be a journalist. It could also be a researcher. And historically, we also had, for example, artists or other kind of professionals that join. The idea is that one spot is kept open for somebody who is not necessarily a member of the crew, is somebody who might want to come with an external perspective to observe what is going on and then to report back. Because of course we could be telling that story as crew 1 billion times, but we are in it. And, we also have a very insider perspective on what we do. The idea is to make the space for people to come from the outside world, take a look at the things that we see, the challenging situations, the political crisis that we see, and then share their own thoughts. It's not necessarily a journalist, as I said. It could be a different kind of person, but that is really the rationale behind the position.
There is a question in the chat from Gwen.
Let me see.
Has gender been a barrier or a challenge in establishing relationships with the people you interview or take pictures of? And has the recent event with the Libyan Coast Guard attacking a rescue ship had impact on your work?
So the first part I think is really complicated, and I could be talking about it for hours and hours. I think to me what I really would like us to take away with us from the meeting is that some people the people that we deal with already come from a really traumatizing situation, from really difficult stories, really difficult experiences, and we put a lot of efforts into not causing harm to them. And of course, if you are a woman, if you're a child, if you're traveling as an accompanied minor, if you have a disability, if you come from certain countries, there are reasons for which you are in an even more delicate situation. It's not, I wouldn't say it's a barrier per se, it's more something that we acutely need to keep in the back of our minds, whatever we do, and really make sure that we're not creating issues for that person. So this is really maybe what I would want us to retain from all the conversation. Libyan Coast Guard. So you probably saw it as a glimpse when I showed you the timeline of the brief history of search and rescue. It's something that has taken a bit of a turn in recent years, especially in operations for the civilian fleet. We witnessed an increase, an escalation in violence and tensions between civilian actors and NGOs and Libyan actors that have been increasingly violent against ships. There was, I think, a major moment of realization, including in the media. That was August 2025. There was the first time a Libyan patrol boat really shot at human height against Ocean Viking, which is the ship managed by SOS Méditerranée. It's not the first time that violence was witnessed, but it was a bit of a moment of realization that the situation had escalated in a very dramatic way, and it hasn't gone back ever since. We've adapted as a fleet, as a civil fleet. We have security processes in place. We put in place procedures to keep ourselves safe and to keep our survivors safe. But aside from that, to me, it is really, really troubling because it's a direct reflection of the geopolitical situation in which we work in the Mediterranean, in diplomatic relationships between the European Union and Libya and Tunisia. And to me, it's extremely, extremely concerning. And I don't think there is an easy solution or de-escalation to that. We just have to cope and continue advocating for a change at the policy levels. Cédric.
And we talked a lot about the work on the vessel, but I'm sure, and especially if you are the former German branch of SOS Méditerranée, that you also have an advocacy part where also the role of designers can be meaningful. I mean, organizing events. I mean, do you organize events? Are there, reaching out to schools, reaching out to some activities, doing fundraising, of course, and other type of actions that could be meaningful in terms of communication for the team?
Yes, absolutely. There's actually an extremely active network of supporters, not just for SOS Humanity, but also for a lot of other organizations. And I think, to me, this is really the heart and soul of the work that we do on land, because we could not do what we do without this kind of support and public action. Advocacy, as you say, is a huge component of the work that we do. I showed you before a slide with the main goals of the main mission of the organization, and one was really that of creating change. We really do hope that we're going to make ourselves useless. It's not looking like it right now, but the idea is that there is going to be a point in time when civil society does not need anymore to step up to conduct search and rescue operations, because people don't need to flee, and there's the competent authorities that are trained for this, that are in charge of providing search and rescue assistance where it is still needed. Of course, we're nowhere near that because of the geopolitical situation in which we work, but that is the main goal. And in order to create some change at policy level, we really work a lot on advocacy and advocating, informing, documenting, influencing, and so on. And there's lots of people that also have local groups, local supporting groups that organize events, that showcase movies. There's a beautiful documentaries that was filmed on board my ship, Humanity One. It's called Where the Waves Took Her. And it's currently coming out this year, is being showcased in a few cities all over Europe. If you have an opportunity to go see it, it's really beautiful. It follows the work of a midwife that we have on board, and has a specific focus on the women that we assist that might have gone through very difficult situations of violence. And I think, we could not do what we do if we didn't have a lot of public awareness efforts behind us. And thanks for writing it. I'm going to paste the link.
I think we're for time. So, thank you so much for this. Was particularly interesting for me because from the standpoint of a UX designer, because I don't really deal with the end content in that sense. I'm rather a consumer of the work when I'm doing research. So it was very interesting to see that perspective. Thank you so much. For everybody else, we do have, as this is a YouTube recording, Barbara is now part of the community, so at least for a while, once we decide to delete Slack, everybody can join and come and follow questions. So feel free to do that. And thanks everyone.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Barbara.
Thank you so much.